All right. And I think I'm first because I didn't put Bruce on the agenda this time. And part of that is so that we have plenty of time to dig into the grant. And then if there's questions, you guys have plenty of time to ask questions as well. Just a quick update, John and I did receive the contract and got that signed. So we can now start getting contracts for the grant. We were sort of in a holding pattern. We were told the award and then we had to wait, felt like forever for the contract to come through, but we can now start getting everything else set up and really get the ball rolling. So I think probably the easiest way to explain things is if I share my screen and just walk you through the financial pieces of the grant and then the sub projects that sort of is where some of the spending will be taking place. And then I'll also just mention, it's a little disappointing to just be signing the contract because we only have until June 30th of this year to spend the money and then encumber any remaining funding to spend for next year. And then that's it. So we don't have a lot of time with this grant, which is really unfortunate. But we're going to do everything we can with the time and the money that we have. So big picture, we had initially requested 450,000. So what you're going to see today doesn't eliminate that 50,000, but as I talk through the projects, I'll let you know where we're planning on trimming some of that. There's a few partnerships that we know that we're not going to be doing or pursuing. So the award that we received is for $400,000. The criteria of the award were we need to have something in our projects around restorative practices or a restorative justice program. We need to have some sort of mentoring services for juveniles involved in the juvenile legal system, and we need to have some workforce development or some sort of vocational programming for students. And all three of those will show up within our sub projects, and some of them overlap. This is just the budget at a glance to see where the bigger chunks of funding are going. So administrative costs would be things like if we have, when we hire our liaison, if that person needs a laptop or technology, it funds those types of components, or a cell phone, it would fund that. It would also fund, you know, any other administrative related costs that might be needed for the liaison position that might not just be technology. Salaries are included here. There's 2 positions that are funded through the grant. One of them is the liaison position, which I'll talk about a little bit more. That's really a project within itself. And the other one is a second alternative education teacher for Oceanside Middle School. The rest of what would go into salaries are paid work time for 4 of our highest needs programs across the district, which is intensive support programming for middle school, intensive support programming for high school, alternative education for middle school, and alternative education for the high school. So additional salary amounts in there would be for work beyond contract for those staff members, including ed techs, to spend a week during the summer in planning, training, and programming. Contracted and professional services is another larger area of cost, which is primarily for trainings. One of our sub programs is partnering with the Maine Department of Education to help develop what those trainings will look like. And we're hoping, this whole column here is like, how are we going to sustain some of these things over time? Positions are obviously harder to sustain. But the trainings, this investment will hopefully invest in a train the trainer type of a model, where once we have a core series of staff that are trained, they can continue to providing that training and support within the district. $10,000 here for supplies, which might be some of the things that we might need for classroom supplies for those 4 highest needs classrooms, instructional supplies that they could make use of to make their programming more hands-on, more community focused, more project-based learning. We have $17,000 set aside here for transportation. That would allow us to take some of our students from these programs out of the school and move them into some community-based hands-on learning as well, similar to the approach that we're doing with our extended learning opportunities at the high school. But rather than sending them out on their own like we do in the high school, they could go out as a group, like as a class. We already do this a little bit with we used to do it more often in the middle school with a partnership with Herring Gut Learning. So that's an area that we could look into a little bit more. And we also do this in the high school with partnerships with the apprenticeship. And we also did Herring Gut with the high school for a little bit as well. So looking at expanding some of those hands-on learning partnerships. So I will, are there any questions about overall cost first before I dive into the projects?
No, it's good. Very good.
Okay, I will keep on going here. So projects, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 sub projects here that I'll talk you through. The first one is probably the easiest to explain. This one is a really liaison position. So this whole first project is really primarily focused on having some sort of a community liaison that would help work with the schools and also connect students and families from our school system to other outside agencies and supports. One of those outside agencies is Maine Health. We've already reached out and we're awaiting what our partnership with Maine Health would look like. Maine Health has a strategic plan right now, which is placing providers in homes that would work with families and specifically with students on mental health related needs. So because that's part of their strategic plan, there might not necessarily be a cost for that partnership, but we need to figure that piece out as we go forward. So that 50,000 is sort of there as an earmark for a potential relationship. So it's possible that that could be an area that we could cut if Maine Health is really funding that through their strategic plan and through their insurance and billing. But the salary, of course, I had initially estimated 17 months is obviously going to be fewer than that now. So there's going to be a little bit of a savings there as well, because we're already behind in terms of, I was assuming if we received the grant, we would be able to just jump right into it starting in January. So there would already be a few months of savings for salaries there. Plus, we need to post and we need to fill the position, which is going to take a little bit of time. But I am already getting some interest in that position, even though we haven't posted yet. So hopefully it won't take too much time. It will just be a matter of posting and going through the process. And again, I had already talked a little bit about some general supplies for that position. Any questions about that position? Yeah, Carol.
My question is I would like to know what system involved youth means. That means kids that are in the system, in the legal system, in the mental health system. What does that involve?
Kids that are involved in who have some sort of a legal related issue. Either they have been sent to Long Creek or they have received summons or have some sort of interaction with law enforcement that would sort of be a catalyst for providing some additional supports for the students and families.
Okay.
And that's primarily the intention behind the bill where this funding began. LD 756 is really about those highest risk system involved youth, meaning the legal system. But the funding doesn't have to just be used for those youth. The funding is also intended to be preventative for any students that would be considered at risk, which when I wrote this grant, I actually quoted some research that said all middle school kids are at risk. And I also used some of our behavior related data in showing that we've seen some increases in both our middle school and our high school behavior data over the past couple of years.
Thanks.
Any other questions about the community liaison position?
It would start when, hopefully?
As soon as we post and fill it, and I'm
Okay.
ready to put the posting up this week.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Are we looking to fill this position with existing staff, or is this going to be an open call for a job listing kind of situation?
It's going to be open to whoever applies for it. I think my hope would be that we have somebody fabulous within the community, so it doesn't create a ripple effect when we hire within the district, but it would be just like when we post for any other position.
Stephanie, what are the qualifications for that position?
So I actually received a job description from Home Hope Health from Molly Feener. They have similar like caseworker style types of roles that work with adults, not necessarily with students. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to adjust what some of their job description looks like. But I think one of the most important components of this is that it's somebody who has strong connections within the community. And one thing that we haven't discussed yet is if they need to have some sort of social worker type qualifications. Any other questions?
But do you mean like clinical social worker or bachelor level social worker?
Bachelor level social worker.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah.
Because they wouldn't be the ones providing the clinical level of support for the
Right.
student, but they're the
Right.
ones matching them up and matching the families up with resources.
Right.
Yeah. And there are people who don't have BSWs who have a lot of experience in community development and community grassroots kind of work. So that, that could be creative. Somebody who's done grassroots work in education in rural communities could be a great resource if they're.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One other thing that I'll say about this position is I'm hopeful. I met a couple of times, including this morning, with Dr. Jess Berry from St. George. She's the one that with help and support from others, but really helped to spearhead the change for Midcoast community that you guys were talking about at the last board meeting. I met with her. I also met with Christina Watton from RSU13 this morning, just to talk about this grant and how we can use some of this funding to really jumpstart the bigger picture of community-wide supports. This grant supports RSU13, but there's no reason why other districts can't join in some of the trainings and why we can't use this liaison position to start thinking about more broadly, what might this do for the community if we had some sort of like a Knox community liaison or, part of the thinking right now from that particular group that ran that initial presentation is some sort of a community hub that provides lots of these services and can push into schools. So it would be a nice catalyst, I think, for sort of thinking a little bit more broadly.
I'm sure you're aware of what St. George is doing with their makerspace, Stephanie, and with Jess Berry's work, and I could see that being a really nice outgrowth of some of this thinking in terms of providing students with alternative ways of learning, hands-on type of experiences that hopefully could get them into. And I think it connects very nicely to some of the first three goals that you had mentioned. By getting them to maybe learn some vocational skills or other skills that could get them into what is a really significant need in this community in terms of some of those skilled workers. So it might be a nice sort of thing to coordinate with St. George or maybe to model on some of the work that they've done with their makerspace here in our district.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be reaching out to Bobby Deetjin and talking more about some middle school connections where we might be able to get some students over, a small cohort of students over to do some partnering with Midcoast School of Technology, if we send a teacher over as well to really support that. So second project here is, this meets a couple of criteria of the grant: school-based restorative practice justice programs and mentoring services for juveniles. So we're going to be collaborating with the Department of Education I actually have a meeting with Stacy Barlow this Thursday to talk a little bit more about what they're envisioning. They developed this quote for us and said that primarily what this funding would go toward is time for training and providing some ongoing consultation. When even before the grant came out, I met with Stacy Barlow and the Maine department lead of school safety, John Shapiro. And we talked about, what are some things that we can do in order to support system involved youth or youth that are creating higher and higher instances of crime within a community. And John Shapiro, when he was in law enforcement, before he was part of the Department of Ed, worked for Old Orchard Beach, and they had a community-based plan. So they're going to work with us to build off of that community-based plan so that we're not creating the wheel on our own. We're building off of something that has had some level of success, but we're able to make it our own. So that's really, that funding is primarily going toward that partnership. So it's school safety, it's revisiting our code of conduct, which I think is pretty good. But we want to make sure that we really have that restorative practice foundational piece shored up. Although it states it in our code of conduct, we just want to make sure that we've got all of the practices in place in our schools with the appropriate training. And I think there's more to come there. When I meet with Stacy this Thursday, we'll flesh out a little bit more of exactly what this plan will look like, but I'm hoping that there'll be lots of opportunities for sort of a train the trainer type of a model to make this funding more sustainable down the road. Any questions about that partnership? All right. Stacy Barlow was also at the Change for Midcoast School Communities, or Change for Midcoast Communities. So she was part of that meeting where, there were 200 people that showed up. So she's pretty familiar, I think, with some of the need within this area. And again, I did speak to her before we received the grant. So she's got a little backstory as well. Third project is mentoring services for juveniles. This is not just for juveniles involved in the legal system. This is really a mentoring process for all of our students in our higher risk programs, which would be our ISP, which is intensive support programs, again, both in the middle school and the high school, and our alternative education programs in both the middle school and the high school. There's sort of a whole list of various things here, but I've categorized them under training costs, about $24,700 under training and about $34,000 under salary. I'll jump to salary first because I've already explained this a little bit, but it is additional training days for restorative practices, trauma-informed practices, school safety support for professionals, and really earmarking that funding for some of our early release days next year to provide additional training for our staff that might not regularly be involved in that training. Some of our ISP staff get that training regularly, but a regular classroom teacher might not have that training regularly. A school bus driver might not have that training regularly. So getting more staff trained and into the mix of how to deal with some of the higher level behaviors that we have seen, since they don't just happen contained in a classroom. Or in a self-contained classroom. They happen in the hallways, they happen in other teachers' classrooms, they happen at recess, they happen on the school bus, they happen in the community. So the more people that we have trained in some of these trauma-informed based practices and safety practices, we think that will certainly help the situation so that we're not adding fuel to the fire. The other piece of this is some of the trainings that we're hoping, again, to use sort of a train the trainer model. Some of the ones that we know that we need are, again, trauma-informed practices. There's specific training for our clinical staff that we think would be helpful. Mental health first aid. There's a train the trainer model for the mental health first aid, which could be for any staff. Again, could be school bus drivers, could be ed techs who are supporting playground duty. We also have our partnership with Embark. And I know a couple of you were really involved in this conversation in the beginning of the year. Took us a while. It took us a couple of tries to maintain the funding, but we did carve out the funding for the Embark program through this grant, which will help to cover us for the remainder of this year and for next year. We will have to think of a plan to make that more sustainable ongoing. But Embark is to support substance use or students who are in high substance use homes at the high school. So we're already getting that contract moving. And that hopefully will be up and running and in place really soon. So this is a lot of the training piece that's covered under this project. Any questions?
Can the Embark program be geared toward middle school students as well?
We're going to start it in the high school. It probably could be, but we really want to start with high school and see how things work out there first. I think the way that the law works is any student, regardless of age, is able to basically check themselves into the program. That was one of our concerns at first, is if we needed parent permission and if we were able to provide that level of service within a school. But there is a law that states that for any level of substance use, students can check themselves into a program. So we're starting with the high school, and again, we want to see how things work out there.
I'm just wondering, sometimes I've heard from teachers that by the time they get to high school, it's a little too late.
Mhm.
You know, some of those habits are already forming, unfortunately, at age 11, age 12. I'm just wondering if maybe we could either use Embark or some other program to do some education around some of those issues, so that maybe we have fewer students who are requiring their services as they get to high school.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. We can definitely explore. I don't think the money portion of this is going to be totally used up solely by the high school between this year and next year, because that funding was sort of based on a 2-year agreement. So there will probably be some extra money that's left over there that we could explore what that might look like. I'll have some more conversations with the people at Embark, as well as some of the social workers and school counselors at the middle school.
Yeah, I would imagine that we're not the only district that is thinking this way. And they might already have ideas of what they've done in other districts or other schools that could be applicable and effective for middle school students as well.
Yeah. Yeah, good suggestion.
Stephanie, is there any flexibility about the training, since this has already gone through and been approved? Can you be like, we want to add this training or this training, as long as it's in the budget, or does it have to be what you put on the piece of paper?
No, we can make changes and adjustments.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So if you have any suggestions, feel free.
Well,
to
I am thinking, because you said train the trainer, and one of the things, so I did a train the trainer program at UCLA for motivational interviewing many years ago when I was a baby clinician. And that's a technical term, by the way.
Is it just right out of the
baby
encyclopedia? Yeah.
a baby therapist. But anyway, and I find that, I mean, I don't use motivational interviewing a lot. However, for non-clinical practice, it seems to be really helpful for staff to have ways of like asking questions and getting in terms of, even with trauma work. And there are a lot of train the trainer models that aren't that expensive for that. So that was a thought that just came to my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would follow you up on MI motivational interviewing techniques are really helpful in anything. Yeah. I would also like to be helpful in putting together what you put together for trauma informed, because the toxic stress is much more influential to our students' mental health than traumatic stress, actually. So that's an important understanding. The second thing is, when it says here's trauma focus CBT, what do you What are you thinking about that?
That was actually something that I put together with Nicole Hatch. She's a little more versed in
Yeah,
the clinical world than I am.
Yeah.
So that was a suggestion that came from her.
yeah,
And again, I think it's really just to get our staff more practice and training in some of the behaviors that we're seeing and dealing with.
right, right. And you said it says perhaps families. What are you thinking there?
If this is probably more related back to this project with the Maine Department of Education, but trying to think through how we get families a level of support and training. And again, it probably also links back up with this liaison as well. So if there's any trainings that maybe we don't currently have in the area, I know that there's some great active parenting trainings that are offered, and those are free for families, but they might not necessarily take advantage of them. But if there's something that as a school district we could offer, for example, a couple of years ago, we did a screening through Oceanside High School called Screenagers about teen use of-
Screenagers. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
teen use of screen. It's a really good documentary. There's Screenagers. There's 2 versions of it. They're both excellent. The first one is more about addiction to screens, and the second one is more about
Oh,
depression and mental health effects as a result of that addiction to screen. So,
good.
but anyway, something like that, if we were to do like a screening or a viewing or a panel, just setting aside some of the funding that might support that.
Okay, good. I mean, if we had trainings like that and we had toxic stress and traumatic stress trainings for our staff, our community partners, and parents who want to participate, it would be really powerful for our kids because they'd be getting the same healthy messages as from everybody and the same messages, not disparate messages that may mean the same thing but confuse them.
Right.
So that'd be, if we can use this grant for including all 3 groups and our kids' lives, that would be really amazing.
Yeah.
We did a similar screening of those 2 versions of Screenagers at my previous school, and we followed up with panel discussion with some mental health experts. And we had a pretty large audience of parents, and then had follow-up discussions, small groups and so forth. And I thought it was a very effective form of parent education because people could listen to some of these issues, and there were a lot of aha moments in both those films. And then follow up and sort of relate their own sort of experiences. I think to the extent that we can do more parent education along those lines so that we can really partner with parents on these issues, I think it really has a lot of benefits down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think setting aside some funding for a few events like that would be well worth it. And I think we have staff that would be happy to put something on. I know Ilmi was the one who had initially reached out to me about Screenagers, and it was during COVID, so it's kind of a weird time. We couldn't pull everybody together in the gym and watch the show together, but we did like a streaming online. So yeah, I think that there'll be some energy behind that. All right, I will highlight the last one and then we can just sort of open it up and have a broader discussion. This last one is the piece that I am probably most connected with in terms of the instructional component. And there's definitely a piece of this that connects to the extended learning opportunity idea, even though we can't send individual students out, as certainly not middle school students, and we can't have them do direct on the job training because there's some Maine labor law pieces that prohibit that. We can really only do that ELO experience for 16 and 17-year-olds, but we can take that idea of partnering with the community. There's a lot of energy around that. There's so many people that want to partner with our kids that we don't even have enough kids in the ELO program to provide all those links. But if we can find ways to make use of that energy in a different way, like maybe we can send a group of kids over for a week to learn about that company, or do that in small timeframes, or some sort of a rotation where there's maybe 4 really engaging units and you're spending each unit in a different aspect of the community, either the arts or engineering, or there's lots of stuff that happens, or government. There's lots of stuff that happens in our community that our kids never really get to see. So this is really the workforce development piece. I had in here expanding our JMG contract to include Oceanside Middle School. Right now, our Oceanside High School JMG contract is about $27,000. When I wrote the grant, I was still waiting to hear back from JMG to even find out if this was possible, and they do not have the staff in order to be able to extend that same opportunity to the middle school, and they also don't have the additional funding. So if we had the JMG program in the middle school, we would have to fully fund it, which is much more expensive than $27,000. So this, I envision, is an area that we would eliminate to, again, the full plan was 450,000. We've got to get it to 400,000. That's probably one of those areas that we would need to eliminate. But there's lots of ideas within how JMG is structured that we can certainly apply to the alternative education program in the middle school. Other professional services that we might want to develop a contract with could include, again, places like the Apprentice Shop, Herring Gut. Those are places that we've had partnerships before. We've also partnered with MCMA for music. Trying to think if there's others right off the top of my head. We've partnered with Station Maine before. So I think that there's lots of areas that we can, again, continue to see what kind of services we can use to help develop some of those more engaging units. And again, try to get the kids out of the classroom and into the community a little bit more.
Could you I'll just ask you a quick question. When you say kids, right? Do you mean like any one of our students, or do you mean just those involved in the legal system?
So for this project, it would be those who are involved in either ISP, so intensive support program in the middle school, intensive support program in the high school, alternative education program in the middle school, and alternative education program in the high school. And if we are able to hire for this second alternative education position, and we expand our middle school, our total number of students that we would be serving through those 4 programs, 20, 40, would be about 75 students.
Okay. And again, they're in those programs. They don't have to be in having legal problems.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So the bulk of this funding in this project goes toward the expanding the alternative education program at the middle school and hiring a second teacher to support that program. Also the transportation, the cost of getting kids to and from various places within the community. Supplies, I mentioned that at the very beginning, if they need, supplies to support their curriculum. When we were doing the community planning piece, people also mentioned there might be kids that have some basic needs and might need some supplies. So that could also be used for like a supply closet. It's really going to depend. We want to be able to spend the money. So we've got multiple ideas of how the money could potentially be spent. And then finally, this is additional salaries, which would go toward the 1 full week of planning for ed techs, teachers within those program areas for ISP and alternative education. And is there anything else? I think that's primarily it. This is just, we've got a list here of some possible ways that we can flesh out some of those partnerships. So more hands-on CTE related learning opportunities, Brad, just like as you were saying, possibly some partnerships with Hurricane Island, trekkers, doing some job coach training. There's Voc Rehab that can help to support and train our staff. I think there's a couple of other organizations as well that our community partners were able to suggest to us that we need to dig into. And that is the final project. Any questions or any overall questions or thoughts?
Well, I want to congratulate you again, Stephanie, for pulling this together and doing such a good job outlining this, and it definitely meets a big need in our district. And I'm really excited that we're going to be able to put resources where there's the greatest need for some of the kids who need the most support. So thank you for doing that. I'm worried or a little concerned that it's such a short time period. I know that it's not within your control. I know that this is the greater grant world out there that sometimes you have to spend. And I want to make sure that whatever solutions we come up with, particularly ones that are effective, we can do on an ongoing basis. Because honestly, I don't see this situation getting any better. Unfortunately, no matter how much good work we do to educate parents, no matter how many things we do to sort of address, I just see this as being an ongoing issue for many districts, including ours around the country. So I'm wondering if we can, really be somehow really carefully evaluate what's effective over the next, if it's 4 months or 16 months or wherever period that this money lasts, and then either look toward other grants or look toward increasing our budget to continue the support that is most effective for the students in our district. And sort of we should just be prepared to have these types of services on an ongoing basis. And along those lines, do as much as we can to sort of proactively address these issues and try to nip any sort of bad habits that might be developing at a younger age in the bud, so that by the time they get to the high school, maybe they're less inclined to have these types of issues or less inclined to make bad decisions. So this is why I feel like early childhood education is so important. Setting those right habits and patterns. This is why I feel parent education and parent partnerships are so important. So I guess it's not really a question, but it's just sort of a desire that we really monitor what is effective, and then think of this as not just a short-term thing that we have to do, but something that's probably going to be ongoing, probably for the length of all of our careers and work in the district. So. Yeah,
I agree. And in my conversation with Christina Watton and Dr. Jess Berry this morning, we said we all share the kids because they move, and they all eventually end up being ours at one point or another, or even down the road. A family might have a child in our district, and then that child grows up, and then they're living in Warren, and then their child is going to many people stay in this community, which is wonderful. And I always say we're trying to grow our future community members, and we really need to invest in that. But I don't know that we can just do that in our district. I do think we need to think a little bit more broadly. So if this funding can be used to sort of start up more of a community-based effort, I'm happy to do that as well. Jess is extremely motivated. She's already reached out to the University of Maine. She has somebody who's ready to write a proposal for sort of a community collaborative, and they're ready to study something. It's not totally clear what all of the goals are and what's going to happen yet, but I've been sharing the work of this grant with her. So we're hoping to do some partnership there. And if I'm connected with the person at the University of Maine who's wanting to help to write the proposal and do the study. So I've said we're happy, if we can get some things started and share data, and if you want to use that for some research, that would only benefit us and benefit the community. So we're really looking to be as collaborative as possible.
I have a question for you, John. Where are we with guidance counselors? We had,
We're where we were right from the beginning of the year. We still have 2 open positions at the high school, which we've had no applicants for.
programs are great, but if we don't have people,
I mean, I hope that, if we go into the new hiring cycle for this coming year, that we'll be able to hire some qualified applicants for those positions. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. We're doing everything we can, but right now we've had 0 applicants for those. And it's a problem all over the state, Carol.
yeah, and not just all over our state, but all over.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
And, I have to admit, I hate to turn on the news or read the paper because it doesn't seem to be getting any better at all. We've got, I think we have to maybe do some better kind of investigating at the root. I keep hearing, oh, well, the kids became lonely during COVID. That's not the problem. That's, hold on, I've got a doctor's phone call coming in, but you hear where I'm going with that. Hello?
We do.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just want to echo what Brad said. It's a wonderful grant. It's a lot of great work. Congratulations. Great for our district and opens up some doors for us that maybe we can continue to utilize well into the future.
So just realizing today that we need to add a formal motion to accept the grant at the board meeting. So we'll adjust the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm curious, Stephanie, how might the liaison position be incorporated? Like, how might it incorporate like some real beginning, middle, and end data points? Because when we talk about moving forward, like in terms of who, what, where, do you have a plan, like a sense of how that might happen? In terms of like a job description aspect of the job description, or ways that you might want to see that happen so that we have some data after this?
You mean have that person do a level of data?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like part of that position would be, maybe it's not that position, maybe it's, but like to be able to say, well, when I started the job, this is what it looked like. This is what we did. This is what the outcomes were of what we did. And this is what is needed. And this is what is not. Also, like very clear goals for the position, because one of the things about that position that seems like it's really a great idea and it's funded and it's limited. So it's like, what are the things that actually are achievable in this amount of time in this position, and having so that the person and the position and everyone around has a really clear sense of like what your job is, because that's big, that's broad. So yeah, those are kind of just curiosities.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer for that right off the top of my head. And I don't have the sample job description that Molly sent over to me. I've got to take a little bit more time and take a look through that. And I want to share that with some of our social workers across the district as well, just to get some input on what they would like to see from that position too, in terms of helping to connect families with resources, because I don't want that position to feel like it's overstepping their work. I want it to really be somebody that's more, has more time and flexibility to make all of those community connections happen and know what they are, because I don't even think we understand everything that we have available in our community. Even just trying to put that, Brad, you're aware of that community list that we were trying to work on. That's been a huge challenge just to get that piece together. And actually in collaboration with Dr. Berry, we've got a pretty fleshed out list at this point, but I think it's surprising how much we have available in this community. But the time that when you know that there's an issue, you don't have a lot of time to go research everything that might help resolve that issue. You want to have the resources right at your fingertips, and that's what we haven't really had. All right, any other questions or comments?
Nope, exciting to see this get off the ground, take off, and see where it takes us. It's very exciting. It's a good feeling to feel like something is happening of this nature and of this scope.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all for your time. And next meeting, let's see. 1, 2, 3. We usually do the 4th, right? But sometimes we've had to adjust it. Do we usually do the 4th Monday? I can
I
never
thought it was the
remember.
3rd.
Is it the 3rd?
That's where I get confused,
I know.
because sometimes we have to do the 4th because we have to. I
Sometimes
think
we
it's the
have to-
3rd.
Yeah. Okay. If it's the 3rd, then that puts us at Monday, March 20th at 3:15 will be our next meeting. And Bruce will have the floor that time because we'll talk a little bit about the tech cards.
So Bruce will be in the Caribbean fishing.
So Bruce won't have the floor. I will have the floor with some of the tech integrators.
Bring your phone, dude. Dial in. What's up with that?
I'll have my phone and you can all watch me fish and but actually that day is my birthday and I'll certainly be fishing on my birthday.
Oh, well, happy birthday in advance. So you are what, 45? Is that you gonna be 45 in this?
Right, yeah, sure, I wish.
All right. Perfect. So Monday the 20th. We'll see you then.
All right.
Right.
Have a good day, everybody. See you later.